Everything in woman is a riddle, and everything in woman has one solution. It is called pregnancy. Friedrich Nietzsche. She walks into the room and everything changes. Not because she demands it, not because she forces it, but because the atmosphere bends to her presence. It's not magic, it's not manipulation, it's power. Ancient, quiet, and deeply misunderstood. Most men think power is loud, assertive, commanding. They imagine strength as domination, conquest, control. But Nietzsche saw through that illusion. He didn't speak of physical strength or political force. He spoke of mystery, of creation, of something men couldn't fully understand, and often resented because of it. What Nietzsche recognized, and what many still miss, is that women have always wielded power differently, subtly, indirectly, through suggestion, not imposition, through allure, not aggression, and through the silent, inescapable influence they exert over what men want most but rarely understand: approval, intimacy, meaning. But here's the twist. Men aren't powerless. They're just blind to the rules of the game. She doesn't have to speak to have authority. She doesn't need to argue to be right, because her power lies not in confrontation, but in presence. A glance, a withdrawal, a moment of warmth followed by chilling silence. And the man is disarmed without even realizing it. How many times have you felt it? That confusion when she pulls away, and you don't know why. That moment when your confidence collapses because she looked at you differently. That feeling of being small, not because she attacked you, but because she no longer noticed you. This is the terrain most men refuse to study. They label it emotional, irrational, manipulative. But that's a defense, a shield to avoid facing the reality that men aren't the only ones with agency, that women, whether by biology, culture, or sheer intelligence, know how to guide dynamics without needing to fight for control. And that scares us, because if her power doesn't look like ours, how do we measure it? If she doesn't dominate, how do we know when we've lost? If she never says what she wants, how do we know we're enough? We want clarity. But her power lives in ambiguity, and that's not a flaw, it's the feature. Nietzsche called woman a riddle, and not in a poetic, romantic way, but in a philosophical one. A challenge to the male psyche. A mirror reflecting not just who she is, but who we are when we're with her. Think about it. Why do the women you chase have more influence over you than the ones who chase you? Why do you respect the one who withholds more than the one who gives freely? Why do you feel compelled to prove yourself to the one who never asked? That's not an accident. It's design. Her silence is a question. Her distance is a test. Her unpredictability is a form of pressure that makes you reveal yourself. Not to her, but to yourself. This is not about gender wars. This is about self-awareness. About waking up from the lie that says if you're good, kind, stable, she'll love you. Because love isn't a reward. It's not a prize you earn for being safe. And here's where many nice guys fail. They offer comfort, consistency, predictability. And they wonder why those things aren't enough. It's not that women don't value those traits. It's that stability without edge is invisible. You can't feel safe if there's no threat. You can't crave warmth if there's no cold. You can't admire a man who's never had to resist being consumed. If you always agree, who are you? If you never challenge, what do you stand for? If your presence doesn't create tension, how can she feel alive with you? We've taught men to suppress their edges, to be agreeable, to please, to listen without leading. And in doing so, we've stripped them of the very tension that creates emotional polarity. That's why she doesn't stay. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were too easy to understand. Remember the quote, "Everything in woman is a riddle." She doesn't even fully understand herself. So why do you think being understood is the path to her heart? She doesn't need you to solve her. She needs you to withstand her complexity without collapsing. To hold your ground when the ground shakes. To stay calm when she storms. To not reduce her to something explainable, but to admire her for being untamed. That's what creates desire. Not certainty, but tension. not comfort, but depth. You feel that? Good. Now take a second and ask yourself, have you ever felt like being a nice guy cost you more than it gained you? Have you ever been left wondering why she walked away when you gave her everything? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear the truth. Not the polished version, the version you hide behind, but the raw one, the one you say only to yourself when no one's watching. And don't forget, if you're tired of seeing the world through the wrong lens, if you want to understand women, love, and power from a deeper level, subscribe to the channel. This isn't about tactics, it's about transformation. Let's keep going. She tests you, not because she's cruel, but because she's instinctively searching for something deeper. Not a man who simply agrees, but a man who remains himself in the face of her changing moods. A man who doesn't bend into shapes just to avoid conflict. One who won't disappear the moment her affection becomes inconsistent. That's the paradox no one teaches us. You thought love was harmony, but she feels attraction in friction. You thought being non-threatening made you more desirable, but it only made you forgettable. You wanted to be her peace, but she needed to feel your fire. Because her respect doesn't come from what you give. It comes from what you protect, even from her. And now you begin to see it. Her power isn't in domination, but in evocation. She draws things out of you, forces you to confront parts of yourself you've hidden. And if you're too fragile, if your ego is built on being liked, you won't survive it. You'll collapse into resentment, into blame, into telling yourself that women are too much, too emotional, too confusing. But the truth is, they're not confusing. You're just unprepared. Because no one told you this. She doesn't want a boy who says yes. She wants a man who knows when to say no, and means it. She wants polarity, not politeness. She wants to feel something real, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. But we've trained men to avoid discomfort, to confuse tension with danger, to believe that boundaries are rejection and that being challenged is personal. So the moment she withdraws, tests, or shifts, we panic. We ask, what did I do wrong? When the real question is, who am I becoming? That's her unconscious gift, to pull you into growth through emotional tension. Not because she's trying to fix you, but because she's trying to feel you. Can you hold her emotional chaos without needing to fix it? Can you hear her contradictions without shutting down? Can you remain grounded while she burns through layers of doubt, desire, insecurity, and longing? This is where power diverges. You see, masculine power stabilizes, feminine power disrupts, and when the two meet, not in battle, but in balance, the energy becomes magnetic. That's what she's craving. Not dominance, not submission, but the dance. The rhythm of strength meeting strength, not to overpower, but to awaken. Because when she senses that you won't fold, that you won't betray yourself to gain her favor, she begins to trust you. And from that trust comes respect. From respect, attraction. And from attraction, the possibility of something real. But if you short-circuit that process by trying to shortcut your way to her approval, you miss everything. She doesn't want your surrender. She wants your presence. She wants to feel your edges, not because she wants to be cut by them, but because she wants to know they exist. Because only a man who has edges can be trusted not to disappear. Think about that. How many times have you given up your boundaries just to make her happy? How many times did that backfire? Not because you were too loving, but because you were too scared to be unloved. And that fear makes you weak in her eyes. Not because she's heartless, but because a woman's deepest instinct is to feel the container of a man's soul. If it collapses too easily, she no longer feels safe to surrender. Because make no mistake, for her to let go, she has to trust that you can hold what comes out, that you won't run, that you won't judge, that you won't crumble when the waves crash. That's the power she's really testing for. Not if you're perfect, but if you're solid. And now you begin to see why so many nice guys fail. They want to be chosen without being challenged. They want intimacy without resistance. They want access without responsibility. But that's not how polarity works. True connection is forged in fire. And if you can't handle the heat, you don't deserve the intimacy that comes after it. She's not complicated. She's just not simple. And the moment you stop expecting her to be predictable, to be logical, to be linear, is the moment you begin to meet her where she truly lives. In feeling, in nuance, in the unspeakable energy between moments. That's where attraction is born, in the space where logic dies and presence begins. Now look closer at your past. How many relationships did you ruin by trying to fix her emotions instead of holding them? How many women walked away because you became smaller in her storms instead of stronger? Be honest. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Not for validation, but for truth. And if you've felt this shift happening inside you, this realization that love isn't what you were taught, you're not alone. There are men waking up everywhere, quietly, painfully, powerfully. And if you want to be one of them, subscribe. This journey isn't about strategies. It's about courage. And we've only just begun. She doesn't lose interest because you're kind. She loses interest because your kindness is performative. It's not rooted in strength, it's rooted in fear. And she can feel that, even if she can't name it. You offer safety, but it's the safety of emotional emptiness, predictability, passivity. A man who's too careful to touch her soul. You think being soft will unlock her heart. But a woman's heart is not a vault. It's a storm. It doesn't open with obedience. It opens with energy, with depth, with presence that doesn't flinch. Because emotional safety doesn't mean being agreeable. It means being grounded while she's not. It means having enough internal order to hold her chaos. But you, like most men, were taught to fear chaos, to run from it, to silence it. So you repress your own storms. You smooth over your truth. You kill your instincts in the name of being nice. And then you wonder why she stops craving you. Because she doesn't want a shadow of a man. She wants a man who's alive. Even if that aliveness is messy. Even if it challenges her. Even if it unsettles what's familiar. Because in that tension, she feels you. She feels herself. She feels something worth staying for. Women are not leaving nice guys because they want to suffer. They're leaving because the emotional desert is worse than the emotional storm. She'd rather argue with a man who's present than agree with one who's absent. Do you understand that? She wants polarity. The current. The pulse. The emotional weight of a man who isn't trying to win her, but trying to see her. And let himself be seen in return. That's not something you fake. It's something you are. But most men are too terrified to be seen. They smile through resentment, compliment through confusion, love through emptiness. They hope that if they just stay nice enough, patient enough, giving enough, she'll finally notice them. But she notices everything. And the one thing she can't unsee is your fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of conflict. Fear of losing her, even if you never had her in the first place. That's what kills attraction. Not your softness, but your insecurity. Not your care, but your collapse. Because the very moment you stop leading yourself, she has no one to follow. That's why so many relationships die silently. Not in betrayal, but in the erosion of polarity. Two people trying so hard to be compatible, they forget to be themselves. And the woman slowly becomes the emotional leader, not because she wants to, but because he won't. He waits for her signals. He mirrors her moods. He walks on eggshells to avoid rocking the boat. But that boat needs rocking. It needs direction, weight, boldness. She needs to feel the gravity of your presence, not the lightness of your approval. That's the seduction, not in games, but in grounded truth. The paradox is that the more you try to be what she wants, the more invisible you become. Because what she wants is not perfection. It's you, unmasked. She wants the man behind the performance, the raw, unrefined, untamed self. That's the man she can't predict. That's the man she respects. That's the man she feels. But to be that man, you have to stop playing safe. You have to risk being misunderstood. You have to say what you mean, even when it shakes the ground. You have to choose authenticity over comfort, depth over harmony, presence over politeness. That's not arrogance. That's embodiment. And that's exactly what the modern man is missing. because too many of us learned that being chosen meant being soft, small, agreeable. We gave up power for peace and lost both. But there's a shift happening now. Can you feel it? A new kind of man is emerging. One who doesn't dominate. One who doesn't shrink. One who leads with heart, not ego. One who can hold space for a woman's power, because he's claimed his own. He doesn't need to prove himself. He doesn't need to control. He just is. Rooted. Alive. Unshakable. And when she meets that energy, she melts. Because that kind of man awakens something primal in her. A trust beyond words. A longing to surrender. Not because she's weak, but because she's finally safe to rest. In him. In herself. In the dance they create together. That's the deeper layer of feminine power. It's not about control. It's about reflection. She shows you what you haven't owned in yourself. And if you're willing to face it, to step into that fire, you become the man she's never had, but always known. You've been told to be useful, to be stable, to be dependable. And yet, you still feel invisible. You gave her consistency, and she left anyway. You gave her comfort, and she grew cold. You think this means you weren't enough. But what if the truth is far more confronting? What if you gave her everything, except yourself? Because being needed is not the same as being wanted. She doesn't want to carry you. She wants to collide with you, to be challenged, to be moved, to feel a force of presence so alive, she forgets the scripts, the games, the roles she's been told to play. And you've been playing a role too. The nice guy, the stable provider, the emotionally available man who listens, validates, and never dares to say no. But she doesn't want a man who simply agrees with her. She wants a man who makes her feel. And feelings don't emerge in the absence of tension. They emerge in the presence of truth. Not the sanitized, self-edited version of truth, but the one that comes from your gut, from your soul, from the part of you that doesn't ask for permission to exist. That part is raw. It's risky. It's magnetic. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't apologize for its weight. And when you live from that place, you stop chasing her. You start calling her forth, not through manipulation, through embodiment, because she can feel when your power is real, not loud, not aggressive, but rooted. A quiet storm behind your eyes, a grounded knowing in your words, an inner fire that doesn't burn her, but warms her enough to stay. She's not testing your patience. She's testing your depth. She's not waiting for you to be more agreeable. She's waiting for you to be more you. So many men never get this. They become emotionally domesticated, hoping their politeness will spark desire. But desire doesn't live in obedience. It lives in mystery, in polarity, in presence. If you are always available, always predictable, always compliant, where's the edge? Where's the energy? Where's the soul of the man she first noticed? You buried him. Under routines, under logic, under fear. And now, she misses someone who's still inside you, the real you. The man who doesn't shrink in her intensity, who doesn't flinch at her silence, who meets her not as a pleaser, but as a partner. That's what emotional attraction really is. Not just chemistry, not just good timing, but resonance, the vibration between two people who refuse to lie to each other, or to themselves. And here's the truth. If you don't respect yourself, she can't feel you. If you don't challenge her emotionally, she won't feel safe to relax into her femininity. If you don't have a relationship with your own power, her power will dominate you. Not because she wants to, but because nature abhors a vacuum. You must stop outsourcing your masculinity to her approval. You must stop waiting for permission to take up space, because the moment you reclaim your inner authority, everything changes. You stop asking, "What do women want?" and you start asking, "Who am I when I'm not performing?" That man is attractive, not because of what he says, but because of who he is. When you speak from your center, you don't need to raise your voice. When you know your value, you don't need to beg to be chosen. When you live your truth, she doesn't need to carry your weight. She can lean into you. she can relax, she can desire. And that, right there, is the awakening. The realization that women don't lose interest in kindness. They lose interest in fear disguised as love, in men who play roles instead of living in their reality, in connections that lack heat, depth, and unpredictability. So ask yourself, are you really present, or are you just behaving? Are you standing in your truth, or are you avoiding discomfort? Are you leading, or are you pleasing? She will feel the difference. She already does. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be real. Let her feel the full weight of your energy. Let her meet the man who doesn't just protect her, but awakens her. Because that's the man who never becomes invisible. That's the man she can't stop thinking about. That's the man who leads with soul, not strategy. And the world needs more of him. Are you ready to become him? Let me know in the comments below. How do you see power playing out in your own relationships? Do you recognize where you've collapsed, where you've avoided tension, where you've played it too safe? I want to hear your experience. This conversation matters. And if this message hits something in you, share it with your brothers, your friends, yourself. And above all, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because what we're building here isn't just a platform, it's a movement. A place where men stop performing and start awakening. If you're ready for more, you know what to do. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and step fully into the man you were meant to be. It starts here. It starts now.